Trent Holloway's $300,000 sports car wasn't supposed to break down on a rainy Tuesday evening, especially not in the poorest district of the city. As one of the youngest CEOs in Silicon Valley, he'd built his empire on precision and control. But tonight, the universe had other plans. When a small girl with an umbrella appeared through the storm offering him shelter, he had no idea this moment would unravel a connection that stretched back 15 years. To a time when his brother lay dying in a hospital bed and a stranger's sacrifice saved his life. The same stranger whose daughter now stood before him, completely unaware that her simple act of kindness was about to transform both their worlds forever. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The rain hammered against the windshield of Trent Holloway's Lamborghini Huracan as steam rose from beneath the hood, creating an almost ghostly silhouette against the neon-lit streets of downtown's forgotten town. District. At 32, Trent had built Holloway Industries into a tech empire worth over $2 billion. But right now, his greatest achievement felt as useless as the luxury vehicle that had just betrayed him on the worst possible night. The quarterly board meeting was in 3 hours, and missing it would cost him more than just money. It could cost him control of his own company. He pulled out his phone, water droplets immediately obscuring the screen as he stepped out of the car. The expensive Italian leather of his custom suit absorbed the rain like a sponge, and his handmade shoes splashed through puddles that probably cost more than most people made in a month. The irony wasn't lost on him that despite having enough money to buy a small country, he was now stranded like any common person whose car had broken down. No signal. Of course. This part of the city was notorious for poor cell tower coverage, another reminder of how the wealthy districts received priority while areas like this were left behind. Trent had never given it much thought before, his world of boardrooms and penthouse offices existing in a bubble far removed from these realities. The street around him buzzed with life despite the weather. Small restaurants with hand-painted signs in multiple languages glowed warmly through the rain, their windows fogged with steam from hot food and the breath of customers seeking shelter. Street vendors huddled under colorful umbrellas, protecting their wares from the downpour while still calling out to potential customers. The sounds and smells were entirely foreign to Trent's sanitized corporate world, a symphony of sizzling oil, shouting voices, and car horns that created an urban melody he'd never bothered to notice before. "Mister, you look very wet." The small voice came from somewhere near his elbow, and Trent looked down to see a girl who couldn't have been more than 9 years old standing beside him. She held a bright yellow umbrella decorated with cartoon cats, its cheerful design a stark contrast to the gray evening. Her dark hair was pulled back in 2 neat braids, and she wore a school uniform that had seen better days but was meticulously clean and pressed. "I'm fine," Trent replied automatically, the same dismissive tone he used with employees who interrupted him during important calls. But something about the girl's earnest expression made him pause. She wasn't looking at him with the mixture of awe and greed he was accustomed to when people recognized his wealth. Instead, her dark eyes held genuine concern, as if his well-being actually mattered to a complete stranger. "My mama says nobody should stand in the rain without an umbrella," she continued, seemingly unbothered by his brusque response. "You could catch cold, and then you'd be sick and sad. I don't like when people are sad." She tilted her umbrella toward him, offering to share the small circle of dry space beneath its canopy. Trent stared at her for a moment, unsure how to respond to such uncomplicated kindness. In his world, every gesture came with strings attached. Every offer of help had a price tag. But this child was offering him shelter from the storm, with nothing to gain and everything to lose. Her own clothes already getting wet as she angled the umbrella in his direction. "What's your name?" he found himself asking, crouching down to her level despite the puddle that immediately soaked through his expensive pants. "Lily Jew," she said with a bright smile that seemed to light up the dreary evening. "I'm 9 years old, and I live right there." She pointed to a narrow apartment building squeezed between a dumpling shop and a laundromat. "We have a food stand on the first floor. Mama makes the best wontons in the whole city. Everybody says so." "I'm Trent," he replied, leaving off his last name. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure he wanted to be recognized. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Trent," Lily said formally, as if she'd been taught proper manners despite her young age. "Are you waiting for someone to fix your car? It looks very fancy, but also very broken." Trent glanced back at his disabled Lamborghini, steam still rising from its hood like a mechanical funeral pyre. "Something like that. I'm supposed to be somewhere important, but—" He gestured helplessly at the dead vehicle. "Oh, no," Lily said with the kind of genuine distress that only children could muster for a stranger's problems. "That's very bad. Important places don't like to wait. My mama taught me that. She's always on time for everything, even when it's hard." She paused, studying his face with the intensity of someone far older than her years. "Would you like to come inside? We have hot tea, and it's warm. Maybe your phone will work better inside, and you can call someone to help." The offer was so simple and pure that it caught Trent completely off guard. When was the last time someone had invited him somewhere without wanting something in return? When had anyone shown him kindness without knowing his net worth first? He found himself nodding before his logical mind could intervene with reasons why this was a terrible idea. "That's very kind of you, Lily, but I shouldn't impose on your family," he said, though he was already taking a step toward the building she'd indicated. "Mama always says we should help people when they need it," Lily replied matter-of-factly. "She says kindness is like planting seeds. You never know what beautiful things might grow." She took his hand with the unconscious trust of childhood, her small fingers surprisingly warm despite the rain. "Come on, our tea is really good. Mama grows the herbs herself in little pots by the window." As they walked toward the building, Trent found himself studying the neighborhood with new eyes. What he'd initially dismissed as rundown and chaotic revealed itself to be a vibrant community where people knew their neighbors and looked out for each other. An elderly man smoking under a shop awning nodded to Lily as they passed, calling out something in what sounded like Mandarin. A woman hanging laundry from a fire escape waved despite the rain, and several children pressed their faces against restaurant windows, fogging the glass as they watched the unlikely pair make their way down the street. The building Lily led him to was narrow and old, but its entrance was swept clean and decorated with small potted plants that somehow thrived despite the urban environment. The smell of cooking food wafted from the ground floor, a complex mixture of spices and herbs that made Trent's stomach rumble in a way it hadn't in years. His usual meals were either catered affairs at business dinners or quick protein bars consumed between meetings. When had he last eaten something made with love rather than profit margins? "Mama, I brought someone who needs help," Lily called out as they entered the small restaurant space. The interior was tiny but immaculately clean, with perhaps 6 tables covered in cheerful red tablecloths. The walls were decorated with photographs of family gatherings and certificates written in Chinese characters. Behind a small counter stood a woman who looked to be in her late 30s, her hair pulled back in a practical bun and her hands dusted with flour. Meiju looked up from the dumplings she was preparing, and for a moment her expression registered surprise at seeing her daughter accompanied by a man in an expensive suit, dripping rainwater onto her floor. But if she was concerned about the incongruity of the situation, she didn't show it. Instead, she smiled warmly and gestured for them to sit down. "Welcome to our restaurant," she said, in accented but clear English. "Lily is always bringing home strays, though usually they have 4 legs and meow." Her gentle teasing made her daughter giggle, and Trent found himself smiling despite the circumstances. "I'm sorry to intrude," Trent began, but May waved away his apology with a flour-dusted hand. "No sorry needed. My daughter has good instincts about people who need help. You sit, get warm." I make tea." She moved with efficient grace around the small kitchen, her actions speaking of years of practice and genuine hospitality. "Lily, go get the good cups from upstairs, please." As Lily bounded up a narrow staircase that apparently led to their living space, May continued her preparations while stealing glances at her unexpected guest. Trent found himself studying her face, noting the laugh lines around her eyes and the way her hands moved with practiced skill as she prepared tea. There was something familiar about her, though he couldn't place what it might be. "You have car trouble?" May asked, setting a plate of fresh dumplings on the table without being asked. The gesture was so natural and generous that it made Trent's chest tighten unexpectedly. "Yes, it broke down just outside. I was trying to get to an important meeting, but now—" He pulled out his phone again, hoping for a signal that still didn't exist. "Ah, technology," May said with a knowing smile. "Very convenient until it isn't. Here, you try." She handed him the landline phone from behind the counter, its receiver worn smooth by countless hands. Sometimes old ways work better than new ways. Trent dialed his assistant's number, grateful when the call connected immediately. "Sarah, thank God. My car broke down on 5th Street near the Garment District. I need you to send a car immediately and call the board to let them know I'll be late." His assistant's voice crackled through the old phone, professional concern evident even through the poor connection. "Of course, Mr. Holloway. I'll have a driver there in 20 minutes and reschedule the meeting for 10 p.m. Are you somewhere safe?" Trent looked around the small restaurant, taking in the warm lighting, the smell of home-cooked food, and the sound of Lily's footsteps on the stairs above. "Yes," he said, surprising himself with how true it felt. "I'm somewhere very safe." Lily returned with a tea set that was obviously reserved for special occasions. The delicate porcelain cups painted with tiny flowers and birds. She set them on the table with the careful attention of someone who understood their value, then settled into the chair across from Trent with an expectant smile. Mama makes the best jasmine tea," she announced proudly. "She learned from my grandmother, who learned from her grandmother. It's a very old recipe with special herbs that make you feel better when you're sad or worried." May poured the tea with ceremonial care, the fragrant steam rising between them like incense. Trent accepted his cup gratefully, wrapping his hands around its warmth. The tea was indeed exceptional, with a complexity of flavors that spoke of careful cultivation and generations of knowledge. "This is incredible," he said, and meant it. "I've had tea at some of the finest restaurants in the world, but nothing quite like this." "My mother taught me that the secret ingredient is intention," May replied, settling into her own chair with a cup of tea. "When you make something with love and care, people can taste the difference. Food is not just nutrition, it's communication. It tells people they matter." The simple wisdom of her words hit Trent harder than any business philosophy he'd studied in graduate school. When had he last done anything with genuine care rather than calculated self-interest? When had he last communicated to someone that they mattered simply by virtue of being human? "Tell me about your business," he found himself saying. "How long have you been running the restaurant?" May's face lit up with pride. 5 years now. After my husband died, I needed to support Lily, but I had no experience with business. Only cooking, which my mother taught me. So I started with a small cart on the street corner, making dumplings and noodles for workers at lunchtime. Eventually, I saved enough to rent this space. It must have been difficult starting over with a young child, Trent observed, noting the way Lily leaned against her mother's shoulder as she spoke. Very difficult, May agreed, but also necessary. Lily needed to see that we could build something good from sad circumstances, that we could help people and make them happy, even when we were struggling ourselves. Lily nodded solemnly. "Mama says every person who eats our food becomes part of our family, even if we only meet them once. She says food is like a hug you can taste." The childish poetry of the statement made Trent smile despite himself. That's a beautiful way to think about it. What about you? May asked. What kind of work makes you wear such fancy clothes and drive such an expensive car? Trent hesitated, unsure how to explain his world of hostile takeovers and profit maximization to people who clearly operated on entirely different principles. I run a technology company. We develop software and hardware solutions for various industries. It was his standard elevator pitch, polished and meaningless. But Lily's next question cut through the corporate speak with the directness that only children possessed. Do you help people with your technology? The question hung in the air between them, deceptively simple yet devastating in its implications. Trent realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd thought about his work in terms of helping people. His company was profitable, efficient, and growing. But those metrics suddenly felt hollow when viewed through the lens of a 9-year-old's moral clarity. We try to make things more efficient for businesses, he said finally. Help them save money and time. Oh, Lily said, her expression suggesting she found this answer somewhat lacking. That's good too, I guess. But it would be more fun if you could help people feel happy, like Mama does with her food. Before Trent could formulate a response, the sound of car doors slamming outside announced the arrival of his rescue. Through the rain-streaked window, he could see a black sedan with his company's logo, his driver already getting out to assess the situation with the Lamborghini. That's my ride, Trent said, standing reluctantly. The warmth of the small restaurant suddenly felt precious, as if leaving would mean losing something irreplaceable. I should go. Of course, May said, rising as well. Your important meeting is waiting. But as Trent reached for his wallet, intending to pay for the tea and hospitality, May shook her head firmly. No money. You are our guest, not our customer. There's a difference. Please, I insist, Trent said, pulling out several bills. You've been incredibly kind to a stranger. Which is exactly why no payment is needed, May replied with gentle finality. Kindness isn't a transaction, Mr. Trent. It's a gift we give freely, hoping it will inspire others to do the same. Lily jumped up from her chair and ran to a small shelf near the window, returning with something clutched in her small hands. Here, she said, offering him a small origami crane made from bright red paper. I made this in school today. It's for good luck, so your important meeting goes well. Trent accepted the delicate paper bird, its wings carefully folded with the precision only a child could achieve when creating something meant as a gift. Thank you, Lily. This is very special. Promise you'll keep it, she said seriously. And remember that someone thinks you're a good person, even if you forget sometimes. The words hit Trent like a physical blow, their innocent wisdom revealing truths he'd spent years avoiding. He crouched down to Lily's level one more time, meeting her earnest gaze. I promise. And I promise to remember everything you and your mother have taught me tonight. As he walked toward the door, May called after him. Mr. Trent, you are welcome here any time. We are open every day except Sunday. Family is always welcome. The rain had lessened to a gentle drizzle as Trent made his way to the waiting sedan. The origami crane carefully tucked into his jacket pocket. His driver, a man named Rodriguez who'd worked for the company for 3 years, jumped out to open the door. Sorry about the car trouble, Mr. Holloway. The tow truck is already here for the Lamborghini. We should be able to make the rescheduled meeting with time to spare. Trent settled into the leather seat, his expensive suit still damp from the rain. As the sedan pulled away from the curb, he turned to look back at the small restaurant. Through the fogged window, he could see Lily and May waving goodbye, their faces glowing in the warm light of their small world. Rodriguez, Trent said suddenly. How long have you been working for the company? His driver glanced in the rearview mirror, surprised by the question. 3 years next month, sir. Why do you ask? Do you have family? Yes, sir. My wife Maria and our 2 kids, Elena is 7, and Carlos just turned 5. Trent realized he'd never asked Rodriguez about his family, never shown interest in the man who drove him safely through the city every day. "What do you do on your days off?" "Well, we like to go to the park on Sundays. Sometimes we have picnics by the lake. Nothing fancy, but the kids love it. Maria packs these incredible sandwiches, and we just spend time together." Rodriguez's voice warmed as he talked about his family. "Simple pleasures, you know?" "No." Trent realized he didn't know. His weekends were filled with networking events and strategic planning sessions. He couldn't remember the last time he'd done something simply because it brought him joy rather than advancing his position or increasing his wealth. The board meeting was held in the conference room on the 40th floor of Holloway Industries headquarters, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city below. The dozen men and women gathered around the polished table represented some of the most powerful figures in the tech industry, each worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet as Trent took his seat at the head of the table, their faces seemed cold and calculating in a way he'd never noticed before. "Gentlemen, ladies," Trent began, launching into his prepared presentation about quarterly profits and expansion plans. The numbers were impressive, the growth projections ambitious, and the strategy sound. But as he spoke, his mind kept drifting to a small restaurant where a woman made tea with intention and a child gave origami cranes to strangers. "The proposed acquisition of Microdyne will eliminate our primary competitor in the middleware space," board member Janet Prescott was saying. "Their technology is inferior to ours, but they've been undercutting our prices. Once we absorb their market share, we can raise prices across the board." "What about their employees?" Trent found himself asking, interrupting Janet's presentation. "What about them?" Janet replied, confused by the question. "Microdyne has over 300 employees. What happens to them after the acquisition?" "Standard procedure," board member Richard Caldwell interjected. "We'll keep maybe 10% of their engineering staff and eliminate the rest. Redundancy is expensive, and shareholders don't pay us to run a charity." The casual dismissal of 300 livelihoods made Trent's stomach turn. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were people with families, children who depended on their parents' jobs, dreams and hopes that would be shattered by a decision made in a boardroom 40 floors above the streets where real life happened. "What if we approached it differently?" Trent said slowly. "What if we found ways to integrate their workforce rather than eliminate it?" The room fell silent, 12 pairs of eyes staring at him as if he'd suggested giving away company secrets. Janet recovered first, her laugh brittle and dismissive. "Trent, I know you've been working long hours, but let's not lose sight of our fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. Sentiment doesn't increase stock prices." "Neither does destroying communities," Trent replied, surprised by his own words. "We operate in these cities. We benefit from their infrastructure and workforce. Don't we have some responsibility to give back rather than just take?" Richard leaned forward, his expression concerned. "Trent, are you feeling all right? This doesn't sound like you at all. Perhaps we should postpone the rest of this meeting until tomorrow." The suggestion stunned because it was accurate. This didn't sound like the old Trent Holloway, the man who'd built his empire by ruthlessly pursuing profit above all else. But sitting in this sterile conference room, surrounded by people who measured success purely in financial terms, he found himself thinking about a different kind of wealth altogether. "I'm fine," Trent said. "I'm just suggesting we consider all the implications of our decisions, not just the immediate financial ones." The meeting continued for another hour, but the dynamic had shifted. His board members exchanged glances when they thought he wasn't looking, their expressions ranging from puzzled to concerned. By the time they adjourned, Trent knew he'd planted seeds of doubt about his leadership that would grow into bigger problems if he didn't address them soon. But as he rode the elevator down to the parking garage, He found himself caring less about boardroom politics and more about the origami crane in his pocket. The small paper bird seemed to pulse with warmth against his chest, a reminder of genuine kindness in a world that had forgotten how to give without expectation of return. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, matching Trent's mood as he sat in his penthouse office reviewing reports that suddenly felt meaningless. His assistant Sarah had left a stack of messages on his desk, most from business associates who'd heard about his unusual behavior at the board meeting. The corporate rumor mill was already speculating about his fitness to lead the company he'd built from nothing. But instead of returning calls or damage control, Trent found himself researching bone marrow donation procedures on his computer. The idea had struck him during a sleepless night, a memory that had been nagging at the edges of his consciousness since meeting Mei Ju. Something about her face, the way she carried herself, the combination of strength and compassion that seemed familiar in a way he couldn't quite place. His brother Marcus had been diagnosed with leukemia when Trent was 17 years old. The quote, treatment had been brutal. Chemotherapy that left Marcus weak and skeletal, while their parents struggled with medical bills that insurance only partially covered. For months, the family had lived in a liminal space between hope and despair, waiting for a bone marrow match that might never come. When the call finally came, it had felt like a miracle. An anonymous donor had been found, someone whose bone marrow was a perfect match for Marcus. The transplant presta. Surgery had been successful, and Marcus had made a full recovery. He was now 35 years old, married with 2 children, living a life that wouldn't have existed without a stranger's generosity. Trent had never known who the donor was. Hospital privacy policies protected the identity of both donors and recipients, allowing people to save lives without expectation of recognition or reward. But something about Mei Ju's face, the timeline of when she would have been the right age, and the fact that she was clearly the type of person who would donate bone marrow to help a stranger, made him wonder if there might be a connection. He spent the morning calling contacts at various hospitals, trying to find someone who could access records from 15 years ago. It was a long shot, and even if his suspicions were correct, there was no guarantee he'd be able to confirm them. But the possibility had lodged itself in his mind like a splinter, demanding attention. By noon, he'd made a decision that would have been unthinkable just 24 hours earlier. Instead of attending the lunch meeting with potential investors that Sarah had scheduled weeks ago, he found himself driving through the city toward the garment district, toward a small restaurant where kindness was served alongside jasmine tea. The lunch crowd at May's restaurant was modest but steady, a mix of local workers and neighborhood residents who clearly considered the place a community hub. Trent watched through the window for several minutes before working up the courage to enter, unsure of his reception or his khaki motives for coming. Mr. Trent. Lily's voice cut through the low murmur of conversation as soon as he stepped through the door. She was sitting at a corner table with school books spread around her, apparently doing homework while her mother worked. "You came back." "Mama, look who's here." May looked up from the stove, her face breaking into a genuine smile that made Trent's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. "Trent, welcome back. Are you hungry?" "I just made fresh spring rolls." "Actually, I was hoping we could talk," Trent said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "If you have a few minutes." "Of course," May said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Lily, can you watch the restaurant for a few minutes?" "We'll be right back." She led him to a small table in the corner, away from the other customers. As they sat down, Trent realized he had no clear plan for this conversation. How did you ask someone if they'd saved your brother's life 15 years ago? How did you begin to express gratitude for a gift so profound that it defied conventional acknowledgement? "You look troubled," May observed, pouring tea from the pot that seemed to be perpetually brewing on her counter. "Did your important meeting not go well?" "The meeting was fine," Trent said, accepting the cup gratefully. It's everything else that's become complicated. May waited patiently, her silence inviting confession without demanding it. There was something about her presence that made honesty feel safe, as if she'd heard every kind of human struggle and judged none of them. "Could I ask you something personal?" Trent said finally. "You can ask anything you want. I might not answer, but you can ask. 15 years ago, did you donate bone marrow to help someone you'd never met?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. May's expression shifted subtly, surprise giving way to careful consideration. She set down her teacup and studied Trent's face with new intensity. "Why do you ask this question?" "Because I think, maybe, you saved my brother's life." The words came out in a rush. 15 years of gratitude and wonder finally finding their voice. May's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak immediately. Instead, she reached across the table and took Trent's hand in both of hers, her touch warm and steady. "Your brother? He is well now?" "Yes," Trent said, his voice thick with emotion. "He's married, has 2 beautiful children. He's a teacher now, works with kids who have learning disabilities. He says the experience of being sick made him want to help others overcome their challenges." May nodded slowly, tears beginning to gather in her eyes. "I am so glad. When I donated, they told me nothing about who would receive it, only that it might save a life. For 15 years, I have wondered if it helped someone." "It did more than help," Trent said. "It gave my family back hope when we had none left. It gave Marcus a future he wouldn't have had otherwise. It gave me my brother back." They sat in silence for several minutes, both overwhelmed by the magnitude of the connection that had been revealed. Around them, the restaurant continued its quiet bustle, customers eating and talking while unaware of the profound moment unfolding in the corner. "I need to ask you something else," Trent said eventually. "Why did you do it? You were young, probably barely out of your teens. Why did you volunteer to help a stranger?" May smiled through her tears, the expression transforming her face into something luminous. "My grandmother used to say that we are all connected by invisible threads, that helping one person helps everyone because we are part of the same fabric. When I heard about the bone marrow registry, it seemed like such a small thing to do that might make a big difference. I never imagined I would meet the family I helped, never thought I would see the result of that decision." "You moved to America around that time?" "Yes, I came here for college on a scholarship. My English was not very good, and everything was so different. But I was determined to build a life here, to make my family proud. The bone marrow donation was during my sophomore year. I remember being scared, but also excited that I might be able to help someone." Trent found himself thinking about timelines and coincidences, about the invisible threads May's grandmother had spoken of. Here was a young woman who'd come to a foreign country with nothing but determination and hope, who'd volunteered to help a stranger while struggling to build her own life. The generosity of it, the pure altruism, seemed to belong to a different species of humanity than the one he'd been living among for the past 15 years. "There's something else I need to tell you," Trent said, pulling out his phone. "I'm not just any businessman, May. I'm Trent Holloway, CEO of Holloway Industries. We're worth over $2 billion. He showed her his company's website, watched her expression change as she realized the magnitude of what he was revealing. But instead of the awe or greed he'd expected, May's face showed only confusion. "I don't understand. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to help you and Lily the way you helped my family. I want to make sure she has every opportunity to succeed, every chance to build whatever life she dreams of. I want to invest in your business, help you expand if that's what you want. I want to give back what you gave to us." May was quiet for a long time, her eyes moving from the phone screen to Trent's face and back again. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful and measured. Mr. Trent, I appreciate your gratitude more than you can know. To learn that my small act 15 years ago helped someone, that it made a difference, that is the greatest gift you could give me. But I don't need your money. The response caught Trent completely off guard. In his world, everyone needed money. Everyone had a price. The idea that someone would turn down financial help was almost incomprehensible. I don't understand, he said. You're struggling to make ends meet, working 12-hour days to keep this place running. I could change all that for you and Lily. Could you? May asked gently. Or would you change who we are in the process? Before Trent could respond, Lily appeared at their table, her homework apparently finished and her curiosity too strong to ignore any longer. Are you guys talking about something sad? She asked, noting their serious expressions. You both look like you're going to cry. Not sad, May said, pulling her daughter onto her lap. We're talking about something very important that happened a long time ago, before you were born. Mr. Trent's family needed help, and I was able to help them. Oh, Lily said, her face brightening immediately. That's wonderful. Helping people always makes me happy. What kind of help did you give them, Mama? May looked at Trent, silently asking for permission to share the story. At his nod, she continued. A long time ago, Mr. Trent's brother was very sick. He needed something from someone else's body to help him get better. I was able to give him what he needed, and now he's healthy and happy. Lily's eyes grew wide with wonder. Wow, Mama, you're like a superhero. You saved someone's life. She turned to Trent with new respect. Is your brother really okay now? He's perfect, Trent said, his voice rough with emotion. He has 2 little kids now, a boy and a girl about your age. Thanks to your mama, I got to watch him grow up, get married, become a father. She gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. That's so cool, Lily said, bouncing slightly on her mother's lap. Mama, you never told me you were a superhero. Everyone is a superhero sometimes, May replied, smoothing her daughter's hair. When we help others, when we show kindness, when we choose to make the world a little better instead of a little worse. You're a superhero too, Lily. You helped Mr. Trent when his car was broken and he was sad. Lily beamed at this assessment, then turned back to Trent with sudden seriousness. Since my mama helped your family, and I helped you, does that make us all connected now, like a special kind of family? The innocent question hit Trent like a revelation. Yes, he realized. They were connected now, bound together by threads of kindness and gratitude that ran deeper than blood or business relationships. The random encounter in the rain hadn't been random at all. It had been the universe completing a circle that had been drawn 15 years ago. Yes, he said simply. I think it does make us family. Over the following weeks, Trent found himself drawn back to the small restaurant, again and again. Not as a wealthy benefactor looking to make grand gestures, but as someone hungry for the kind of authentic human connection he'd never known he was missing. He would sit at the corner table, sometimes helping Lily with her homework, sometimes just talking with May about life and philosophy while she cooked. Gradually, he learned their story in greater detail. May's husband had died in a construction accident when Lily was 4 years old, leaving them with medical bills and no life insurance. Instead of crumbling under the weight of tragedy, May had channeled her grief into determination, using the cooking skills her mother had taught her to build a business that could support her daughter. The first year was very hard, she told him one evening as they sat together after the restaurant had closed. I had never run a business, never handled money or customers or permits. But Lily needed me to succeed, so failure wasn't an option. Every dumpling I made, every customer I served, I did it thinking about her. Future. Trent found himself sharing stories from his own past, memories he'd buried under years of corporate success. He told them about growing up in a middle-class household where his parents worked multiple jobs to pay for Marcus's medical treatments, about the fear that had consumed their family during the months of waiting for a donor match, about the guilt he'd carried for being healthy while his younger brother fought for his life. "I built my company partially because I never wanted to feel helpless again," he admitted one evening. "I thought if I had enough money, enough power, I could control everything and protect everyone I cared about. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what I was trying to protect." Lily, who had been drawing at the next table while the adults talked, looked up with the penetrating insight that children sometimes possessed. "Did you forget how to be happy, Mr. Trent?" The question stopped him cold. When had he last been truly happy, not just satisfied with a business victory or pleased with financial gains, but genuinely joyful about being alive? He couldn't remember, and that realization was more unsettling than any hostile takeover or market downturn he'd ever faced. As autumn settled over the city, Trent began making changes to his business practices that sent shockwaves through the corporate world. The Microdyne acquisition was restructured to preserve most of the jobs that would have been eliminated, with Holloway Industries investing in retraining programs and creating new positions that utilized the combined workforce. The board was furious. Shareholders questioned his decision-making, and business magazines speculated about his mental health. But the changes didn't stop there. Trent instituted new policies requiring environmental impact assessments for all company projects, established a fund to provide interest-free loans to small businesses in underserved communities, and began personally reviewing any decisions that would significantly affect employee livelihoods. The corporate culture of ruthless efficiency began shifting toward something more sustainable and humane. "You're committing professional suicide," Janet Prescott warned him during one particularly heated board meeting. "Our stock price has dropped 12% since you started this humanitarian crusade. Investors are losing confidence in your leadership." "Maybe they should," Trent replied calmly. "Maybe we've been measuring success by the wrong metrics for too long." The conflict came to a head on a cold December evening when Trent arrived at May's restaurant to find it closed, the cheerful interior dark and empty. A handwritten sign on the door explained that Lily had been hospitalized with pneumonia, and the restaurant would be closed until further notice. Trent's driver Rodriguez found him standing in the rain again, this time by choice rather than circumstance. "Mr. Holloway, is everything all right?" "Drive me to Children's Hospital," Trent said, climbing into the sedan with purpose he hadn't felt in months. "And call ahead to make sure they know we're coming." The pediatric ward at Children's Hospital was a place of controlled chaos, where hope and heartbreak existed in uneasy balance. Trent found May sitting beside a small bed where Lily lay connected to various monitors, her usually bright face pale and drawn. The sight of the vibrant little girl looking so fragile hit him harder than any business setback ever had. "May," he said softly, announcing his presence without startling her. She looked up, her eyes red with exhaustion and worry. "Mr. Trent, you didn't need to come. I know you must be very busy." "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," he said, and meant it completely. "How is she?" "The doctors say she will be okay, but she needs to stay here for several days. The pneumonia is responding to antibiotics, but they want to make sure there are no complications." May's voice was steady, but Trent could see the fear she was trying to hide. He pulled up a chair beside her, noting the way she held Lily's small hand as if she could transfer her own strength through touch. "Have you eaten anything today?" "I'm not hungry." "That wasn't what I asked." Trent stood up, his decision made. "I'm going to get you some real food, and you're going to eat it. Lily needs you to be strong, which means you need to take care of yourself." He returned 20 minutes later with containers of soup and sandwiches from a nearby deli, along with coffee that actually tasted like coffee rather than the hospital vending machine substitute. As May ate reluctantly but steadily, he found himself studying the other families in the ward, seeing his own past reflected in their worried faces and whispered conversations. "This is where Marcus was treated," he said quietly. 15 years ago, My parents sat in chairs just like these, watching monitors just like those, praying for a miracle that came in the form of your generosity." May reached over and squeezed his hand. "And now the circle continues. You being here for us, caring about Lily's well-being. This is how kindness multiplies. Your brother's recovery didn't end with his health. It created ripples that are still spreading." Over the next 3 days, Trent essentially moved his office to the hospital. He conducted conference calls from the family lounge, reviewed documents on his laptop while Lily slept, and made executive decisions via text message between conversations with doctors and nurses. His board members were apoplectic, his assistant was overwhelmed, and the business press had a field day speculating about his erratic behavior. But Trent found that none of the corporate drama mattered when measured against the simple human reality of a sick child and her worried mother. He was present for the small victories, Lily's fever breaking, her appetite returning, the first smile she managed when she woke up to find him reading her a story about brave princesses and magical kingdoms. "You know what I've been thinking about?" Lily said on the morning she was finally well enough to sit up in bed. "How my mama saved your brother's life, and then you helped us when our car was broken in the rain. And now you're helping us here in the hospital. It's like we're all taking turns being angels for each other." The observation, delivered with the matter-of-fact wisdom that seemed to be Lily's specialty, crystallized something that had been forming in Trent's mind for weeks. Human beings weren't meant to exist in isolation, pursuing individual success at the expense of community connection. They were meant to be part of something larger, contributing to a network of mutual support and care that made everyone stronger. On the day Lily was discharged, Trent made a proposal that he'd been planning since her first night in the hospital. "I want to set up an education fund for Lily," he told May as they waited for the final paperwork to be completed. "Not as charity, but as an investment in her future. She's incredibly bright, and she should have every opportunity to pursue whatever dreams she develops." May's initial response was the same as it had been weeks earlier. "Mr. Trent, your friendship and support are already more than we could ask for. We don't need your money." "This isn't about need," Trent replied. "It's about possibility. I'm not trying to change who you are or how you live. I'm trying to make sure that financial constraints don't limit Lily's choices as she grows up. The fund would be hers, available when she needs it for school, or starting a business, or pursuing whatever path makes her happy." "What do you think, little one?" May asked her daughter, who had been listening to the conversation with the serious attention she gave to all adult discussions. "I think Mr. Trent wants to plant seeds, like you always talk about, Mama," Lily said thoughtfully. "He wants to plant seeds that will grow into beautiful things later, even if we can't see them yet." The simple metaphor captured exactly what Trent was trying to express. He wasn't looking for gratitude or recognition. He was looking to participate in the same cycle of generosity that had saved his brother's life and enriched his own in ways he was still discovering. The education fund was established within the week, structured as a trust that would provide for Lily's educational expenses from elementary school through graduate studies if she chose to pursue them. But more importantly, it opened the door to a deeper conversation about the restaurant's future and May's dreams for expanding her small business. "I have been thinking about opening a second location," May admitted one evening as they sat in the restaurant after closing time, Lily asleep upstairs and the city quiet around them. "There's a space available in the university district, near the campus where I went to school. It would be perfect for students who want good food at reasonable prices." "What's stopping you?" "Money, permits, experience with managing multiple locations. All the things that make dreams complicated when they become real plans." Trent leaned forward, his excitement building as he saw the possibilities. "What if we approached it as a partnership? I could provide the capital and business expertise. You'd provide the vision and culinary skills. We could structure it so you maintain creative control and ownership of the concept, while I handle the logistics and expansion strategy." The conversation that followed stretched late into the night, covering everything from lease negotiations to staff training, from supply chain management to marketing strategies. But underneath the business planning was something more profound. The recognition that their unlikely friendship had evolved into a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. The second location of May's restaurant opened 6 months later, a bright space filled with the same warmth and authenticity as the original, but designed to accommodate larger crowds and longer operating hours. The university students embraced it immediately, drawn by both the exceptional food and the genuine care that went into every dish. But the expansion brought unexpected challenges. Success attracted attention from food critics and lifestyle bloggers who began writing about the authentic ethnic dining experience and the heartwarming immigrant success story. The increased visibility was good for business but uncomfortable for May, who had never sought public recognition for simply doing what felt natural. "They write about us like we're characters in a story, instead of real people living real lives," she confided to Trent one evening as they reviewed the latest round of press coverage. "Some of the reviews make it sound like our food is exotic entertainment rather than family recipes passed down through generations." Trent understood her discomfort completely. He'd spent years being reduced to headlines and sound bites, his complex motivations flattened into simple narratives that served other people's agendas. "We could ask them to stop writing about the restaurants," he offered. "I have contacts in the media who could help with that." "No, that's not the solution," May said thoughtfully. "The attention brings customers, and customers allow us to employ more people and serve more families. But I want to make sure we don't lose ourselves in the process of growing bigger." It was a delicate balance, maintaining the intimate community feeling that made both locations special, while scaling up operations to serve increasing demand. They solved it by implementing policies that seemed unusual in the restaurant industry, hiring locally whenever possible, providing healthcare benefits and educational assistance to all employees, and reserving a certain number of tables each day for neighborhood residents at reduced prices. The business model was less profitable than conventional approaches, but it was sustainable in ways that went beyond financial metrics. Employees stayed longer, customers became advocates, and both locations developed reputations as community gathering places rather than just dining establishments. As the first anniversary of their partnership approached, Trent reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that rainy night when his car broke down in an unfamiliar neighborhood. The hostile takeover attempts from rival companies had intensified as his business philosophy became more collaborative and less ruthlessly competitive. Several board members had resigned in frustration, replaced by people who shared his vision of corporate responsibility and sustainable growth. The financial press had largely written him off as a cautionary tale about the dangers of mixing emotion with business decisions. Holloway Industries' stock price had stabilized at a lower level than its previous peaks, but the company was more stable, more innovative, and more attractive to the kind of employees and customers who valued purpose alongside profit. "Do you ever regret it?" Rodriguez asked him one evening as they drove through the city. Over the months, their relationship had evolved from strictly professional to something approaching friendship, with Trent regularly asking about Rodriguez's family and Rodriguez feeling comfortable offering unsolicited observations about his employer's transformation. Regret what? Changing everything. Giving up the chance to be one of the richest men in the world to become someone who cares about people's feelings and writes checks to charity. Trent considered the question seriously. By conventional measures, he had indeed given up significant wealth and power. His net worth had dropped from the billions to the hundreds of millions. Still enormous by any reasonable standard, but no longer enough to make him a fixture on magazine covers and conference keynote schedules. "I used to think that being powerful meant being feared," he said finally. "That being successful meant being untouchable. But I've learned that real power comes from connection, from being part of something larger than yourself. And real success is measured by how many people are better off because you existed. As if to illustrate his point, they drove past the original location of May's restaurant, its windows glowing warmly in the evening darkness. Through the glass, Trent could see families sharing meals, couples deep in conversation, and elderly neighbors playing cards at their regular corner table. The scene represented everything he'd discovered about the difference between accumulating wealth and creating value. The transformation wasn't without its costs. Several longtime business associates had distanced themselves from him, viewing his new priorities as betrayal of the principles that had made them all wealthy. Social invitations to exclusive events had dried up, replaced by requests to speak at community organizations and non-profit fundraisers. But the losses were more than compensated by gains he hadn't expected. His relationship with his brother Marcus had deepened once Trent shared the story of finding May and learning about her role in Marcus's recovery. The two men, who had grown apart as Trent's business success created distance between his world and Marcus's teaching career, began spending regular time together, often bringing their families to May's restaurant for Sunday dinners that stretched late into the evening. "It's like having my big brother back," Marcus told him one such Sunday as they watched their children play together while May and Marcus's wife Sarah discussed recipes and parenting strategies. "For a while there, I thought I'd lost you to the corporate machine. I'm glad you found your way back to being human." The comment stung because it was accurate. Somewhere in his pursuit of business dominance, Trent had indeed lost touch with his own humanity, measuring his worth by metrics that had nothing to do with the relationships and connections that actually made life meaningful. Lily, now 10 years old and thriving in her accelerated academic program, had become something between a daughter and a wise teacher to Trent. Her observations about fairness and kindness often cut through complex business problems with startling clarity, and her enthusiasm for learning reminded him why education and opportunity mattered more than profit margins. "Mr. Trent, can I ask you something?" she said one afternoon as they sat together in the University District restaurant, she working on a science project about renewable energy while he reviewed proposals for the company's new environmental initiatives. "Of course, Lily. What's on your mind? Do you think people are born good or bad, or do they choose which one to be?" The question was prompted by her school's discussion of historical figures, but Trent recognized its deeper implications. "I think most people are born with the capacity for both good and bad. What matters is which capacity they choose to develop." "So, you chose to be good?" Trent paused, considering how to answer honestly without being too complex for a 10-year-old to understand. "I think I chose to be successful first, and I didn't always pay attention to whether that success came from good choices or bad ones. Meeting you and your mother reminded me that being good is more important than being successful." "But you're still successful," Lily pointed out with the logical precision that made her teachers predict great things for her future. "You just changed what success means." Once again, her innocent observation revealed truths that had taken him months to understand. Success hadn't disappeared from his life. It had simply been redefined. Instead of measuring his worth by the size of his bank account or the fear he inspired in competitors, he now measured it by the positive impact he could have on other people's lives. The realization had practical implications for how he approached business decisions. When a startup company approached Holloway Industries seeking investment capital to develop water purification technology for developing countries, the old Trent would have evaluated the proposal purely on debris, its profit potential. The new Trent found himself equally interested in the technology's potential to improve lives and the founders' commitment to making their innovation accessible to communities that couldn't afford traditional solutions. The investment proved to be both profitable and meaningful, leading to partnerships with international development organizations and recognition from humanitarian groups. More importantly, it demonstrated that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. They were synergistic when approached with genuine intention. As winter gave way to spring, Trent made a decision that surprised even himself. He announced his intention to step back from day-to-day operations and Holloway Industries, transitioning to a chairman role that would allow him to focus on strategic vision and social impact initiatives while giving operational control to executives who shared his evolved business philosophy. The announcement sent shockwaves through the corporate world, with many interpreting it as confirmation that his transformation had been temporary, a midlife crisis that was finally burning itself out. But Trent knew better. This wasn't retreat from responsibility. It was evolution toward a different kind of leadership that prioritized sustainability and community benefit alongside financial performance. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah, his longtime assistant who had become something of a confidant, asked as they prepared the press release announcing his transition. "I've never been more sure of anything," Trent replied. "I spent 15 years building a company that reflected my ambition. Now I want to spend the next 15 years building something that reflects my values." The press conference announcing his new role was unlike any he'd given before. Instead of focusing on growth projections and market dominance, he talked about corporate responsibility and the interconnectedness of business success and community well-being. Instead of standing alone at a podium projecting authority, he was joined by employees, community leaders, and representatives from the organizations that had benefited from the company's evolved mission. May and Lily were in the audience, Lily's presence a reminder of how a chance encounter could reshape everything someone thought they knew about success and meaning. As Trent spoke about the importance of measuring business impact by human flourishing rather than just financial metrics, he caught Lily's eye and saw her bright smile of approval. The transition wasn't without challenges. Some shareholders remained skeptical of the new direction, and competitors continued to view Holloway Industries' collaborative approach as weakness to be exploited. But the company's reputation for innovation and ethical practices began attracting top talent and loyal customers who valued purpose-driven businesses. More personally, Trent found himself with time and energy for relationships and experiences that had been neglected during his years of single-minded ambition. He began traveling not for business conferences, but for cultural exploration, often bringing Marcus's family or spending extended time at the restaurant locations, learning about the communities they served. One such trip took him and Lily to China during her summer break, a journey to explore her mother's homeland and understand the cultural traditions that had shaped the woman whose generosity had changed so many lives. They visited the village where May's grandmother had taught her about invisible threads connecting all people, walked through markets where spices and herbs told stories of generations of family recipes, and spent long evenings with May's extended family sharing meals and memories. "I understand now why Mama always says food is love you can taste," Lily said one evening as they sat with her great-aunt in a kitchen that had barely changed in 50 years. "Every dish carries the story of everyone who taught the person cooking it. When we eat, we're tasting history and family and care all mixed together." The insight captured something essential about what Trent had learned over the past 2 years. Business, like cooking, was fundamentally about nourishment, about providing what people needed to thrive. The most successful enterprises weren't those that extracted the most profit, but those that contributed the most value to the communities they served. As they prepared to return to America, May pulled Trent aside for a conversation that had clearly been building throughout their visit. "I want to thank you," she said simply, "not for the money or the business partnership, though those things have been wonderful. I want to thank you for showing Lily that success doesn't require abandoning kindness, that it's possible to be powerful and generous at the same time." "She's the one who taught me that," Trent replied. "You both did. Everything I've learned about being a better person, a better leader, a better human being, I learned from watching how you live your lives." The flight home gave Trent time to reflect on how completely his definition of wealth had changed. 2 years earlier, he would have measured his worth by comparing his assets to those of other billionaires, always striving to accumulate more than whoever currently held the top position on various rich lists. Now he measured his wealth by the depth of his relationships, the positive impact of his decisions, and the knowledge that his existence made other people's lives better rather than worse. The corporate world took notice of Holloway Industries' continued success under its new philosophy, with business schools beginning to study the company as a case study in sustainable leadership and stakeholder capitalism. Trent found himself invited to speak at conferences and universities, not as a traditional business mogul, but as an advocate for redefining corporate success. The old model of business treated communities as resources to be extracted from, he told a gathering of MBA students at his alma mater. The new model recognizes that businesses are part of communities, and their success depends on the health and prosperity of everyone around them. You can't build sustainable wealth by impoverishing the people and places that make your success possible. The students' questions revealed how hungry the next generation was for business models that aligned profit with purpose. Many of them had grown up witnessing the social and environmental costs of unchecked corporate power, and they were eager to learn about approaches that could create prosperity without destruction. As the second anniversary of his transformation approached, Trent realized that the most profound change hadn't been in his business practices or financial priorities, but in his understanding of what it meant to be successful as a human being. Success wasn't about what you accumulated, it was about what you contributed. It wasn't about being better than other people, it was about helping other people be better than they thought they could be. The lesson had come from an unlikely source. A 9-year-old girl who offered an umbrella to a stranded stranger, and her mother who had saved a life without expecting anything in return. Their simple acts of kindness had rippled outward in ways they never could have imagined, ultimately transforming not just Trent's approach to business, but his entire understanding of what made life worth living. On a warm evening in late spring, exactly 2 years after his car had broken down in the rain, Trent stood in the garden behind the original restaurant location, watching Lily tend to the herb plants that supplied both kitchen locations. She had grown taller and more confident, but she still possessed the same generous spirit that had first moved her to help a stranger in need. "Mr. Trent," she said, looking up from the basil she was carefully harvesting, "do you remember when you asked me if I thought people were born good or bad?" "I remember. I've been thinking about it, and I decided that people are born with seeds inside them. Good seeds and bad seeds. Which ones grow depends on which ones get the most water and sunlight." Her metaphor was perfect, capturing the essential truth about human nature and moral development. People weren't fixed in their character. They were constantly choosing which aspects of themselves to nurture and which to allow to wither. "What kind of seeds do you think you're watering, Lily?" She considered the question with the seriousness she gave to all matters of importance. "I try to water the seeds that help other people grow too, because Mama taught me that the best gardens are the ones where all the plants help each other." As Trent looked around the small garden, he could see the metaphor made manifest. The herbs grew stronger when planted together, different varieties complementing each other's needs and creating an ecosystem more resilient than any single plant could be alone. The same principle applied to human communities, businesses, and families. The realization brought him full circle to the understanding that had begun on a rainy night 2 years earlier. Wealth wasn't about accumulation, it was about circulation. Success wasn't about domination, it was about contribution. Happiness wasn't found in isolation, it was created through connection. In transforming his approach to business and life, Trent had discovered something more valuable than any fortune he'd ever accumulated. The knowledge that every person's well-being was connected to everyone else's, and that true prosperity could only be achieved when it was shared rather than hoarded. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Trent felt a contentment deeper than any satisfaction his previous achievements had provided. He had found his way back to his own humanity, and in doing so, He had discovered that the greatest success of all was simply being someone whose existence made the world a little brighter for others. The origami crane Lily had given him that first night still sat on his desk, its red paper faded, but its symbolism as powerful as ever. It reminded him daily that the smallest acts of kindness could unfold into transformations beyond imagination. That generosity was never wasted, and that the invisible threads connecting all people were stronger than any force that tried to divide them. In the end, Trent Holloway had achieved something far more rare and valuable than corporate dominance or financial supremacy. He had become a person worthy of the kindness that had been shown to him, a man whose wealth was measured not by what he owned, but by what he gave, and whose success was defined not by what he achieved, but by whom he helped along the way. The little girl's kindness had indeed changed everything, not through grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but through the simple, revolutionary act of treating a stranger as someone who mattered. In a world that often seemed to reward selfishness and celebrate isolation, Lily and May had demonstrated that connection and compassion were not just moral choices, but practical necessities for anyone who wanted to build something truly lasting and worthwhile. As Trent locked up the restaurant that evening and walked through the neighborhood that had become his second home, he carried with him the knowledge that he had been transformed not by acquiring something new, but by remembering something essential that he had always possessed but had forgotten how to access: the capacity for genuine human connection, for mutual care and support, for building wealth that enriched everyone it touched rather than concentrating in the hands of a few. It was a lesson worth more than any fortune, a gift more precious than any treasure, and a transformation more complete than any corporate restructuring could ever achieve. And it had all begun with a broken-down car, a rainy night, and a little girl with an umbrella who chose to offer shelter to a stranger, never knowing that her simple kindness would change not just one life, but an entire approach to what it meant to be successful, wealthy, and truly human in a world that desperately needed more examples of all three.